I'm going to continue talking about some key points from Chapter 5 as we're talking about Greek mythology. We did go over the definition of myths, and the ancient Greeks did have very many myths that they used to explain why things happened in the world. Again, up till now, you should have read these pages, 154 to 163 in your textbook. And like I said, I'm basically just going over the highlights with you. So, in addition to myths, there were fables. Fables also were made-up stories. You may recognize this name, Aesop. Aesop had many fables that he came up with. One of the most famous one is the tortoise and the hare. And I'm sure you have heard that story. And the purpose of a fable is that it was supposed to teach a lesson. It had some type of moral that went along with it, something that would help to improve your character, maybe tell you the difference between right and wrong in your behavior. So fables, again, were made-up stories like myths were. Instead of having characters like gods and goddesses, they had animals as their main characters who took on features of human beings. And the purpose of a fable, unlike a myth, was not to explain something, but the purpose of a fable was to teach a lesson or teach morals, teach what the difference is between right and wrong in our behavior. And then the last type of writing we're going to talk about from the ancient Greeks is what's called an epic. An epic is a very, very, very long poem. It's written in a poem-like way, and it's usually tells about an event. So this was some of their first attempts at writing history. The difference with the epics is there was a lot of truth in it with the historical background, but at the same time, in epics, oftentimes gods and goddesses intervened, or the people in the epic, the human beings, had supernatural powers. So it was an attempt at history. There is some truth to some of the epics, but not all of them have very, very accurate information. One of the most famous authors in ancient Greece was a man by the name of Homer. Not to be confused with Homer Simpson, but Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. These are two different books. The Iliad, a lot of people are familiar with because that has the story in it of the Trojan horse. The Odyssey has to do with a soldier who fought in the Trojan War, and it tells about his adventures as he went from Troy back home to Ithaca. So let's go ahead and take some notes at this point. It would be a good idea to make a chart similar to what I have here that compares the three different types of writings from ancient Greece. Myths are untrue stories. They contain gods and goddesses in them as their main characters, and they're used to explain something, explain some type of natural phenomena in the world or how something came into being. Fables are untrue stories as well. They have animals as their main character who take on characteristics of human beings, and they're there to teach a lesson, to tell us maybe some morals, difference between right and wrong, how we should behave. The next group are epics, which is, again, first attempt at writing history. There are some real truths in there, but also there are heroes in there, human beings with supernatural powers, as well as some possible gods and goddesses intervening every now and then. And they're written in a poem form. Homer, again, was the most famous Greek author from the ancient times. So I would like to go over with you your discussion board for this module. You've got to be kind of creative for this one. What I would like you to do is to create and write a myth of your own. I want you to write 2 paragraphs. Try to relate it to your life or personal experience. Start with a question of why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why did this come into being? Why do we do things this way now? So if you start off with a question, it might be easier to create some type of myth. And what you definitely want to do is you want to include these elements of a myth like we talked about. Obviously, it's going to be a fictional story. You're going to have some gods or goddesses in there, and you want to use your myth to explain something. Now, to help out a little bit more, it can be something that already exists with a scientific explanation. So that way, it can be something that's out there. It has a scientific explanation, but I want you to go another direction and create something, make up something as to why possibly this exists. For example, if I give you an example, obviously you can't use this one, but I had students that created a myth about how soccer came into being. So of course there's a history behind soccer, how it came into being, how it got started, but they created a story where gods and goddesses were involved, and something happened between the gods and goddesses that caused them to do a certain thing with this ball that they made markings on, and the markings ended up being black and white markings. So you can create something, make up a story that has an already scientific explanation to it, or a definitive history to it. And as I mentioned down at the bottom, please be careful in what type of myth you're going to use. Do not try to just go on the internet and copy something that already exists. One of your assignments in this module is to read the myth of Demeter and her daughter Persephone. This is enclosed for you in the module. It's several pages long, but it goes in detail about the story as to how something came into being. So you are assigned to read this. I had you read this because it's going to give you an excellent example of what a myth should be like. Obviously, yours isn't going to be this long, but this will give you some really good ideas and some elements of what is in a myth. Then once again, you're going to go to the bulletin board, and you're going to post a sticky note after you've read this, and put your name on the top there, like you did before. You're going to write down what is this myth of Demeter and Persephone explaining. So hopefully most of you will be writing down the correct answer. You should easily be able to figure it out after reading the story. If you don't, then when you go to the bulletin board, it will be there for you to see. Then you want to list one thing, tell about one thing in the story that could be believable, and also one thing in the story that is definitely unbelievable, could not be something true that really would happen. Now, if you've noticed, what I want you to do is write something different than someone else has written. So you can't have the same thing in believable and unbelievable that another student has. So it might be to your benefit to get this done sooner rather than later, because the more people that post, the more likely they may take one of your ideas. So no one can have the same believable and unbelievable characteristics. Enjoy the story, and good luck with your assignment.